Torah portion talks about someone who's a gossiper, someone who slanders people, shares information that he heard from others about other people, someone who literally creates discord amongst people, amongst family members. Ayente. What does the Torah tell us? That in those days a spiritual malady would befall a gossiper. It was a skin disease where lesions would appear all over your body. What would happen? They would call the priest. The priest would come and see and summarize the situation, surmise the situation, and he would pronounce you impure. And you'd have to be isolated, not just isolated in a room in your home, but quarantined outside the entire Jewish camp, which means that you could not be amongst any civilization. Not only that, you couldn't even be with other impure people. You had to be isolated completely alone. Now, this was not a punishment, but rather the Torah helping you with a cure. So by putting the person in isolation, you're not giving them an opportunity to share juicy morsels of information. Just because they heard something, immediately to be able to share it with someone else, they're not in a position to literally do that. By isolating themselves, by avoiding the parties, by avoiding the groups of and crowds of conversation, and you stay away from that for a while, hopefully when you get back to that situation, you'll have learned your lesson that not everything you know and not everything you've heard you have to share with everyone else. There's another thing that you learn: boundaries. When people do things to other people that causes certain situations. So for instance, when you speak about people that causes discord and they feel isolated, they feel alone. By you being alone for a week, 2 weeks or more, what happens? You begin to feel what they feel, and you learn those boundaries. You know, it's interesting that the Torah, over 3,000 years ago, was already giving us insight in what today modern therapy tells us about how to wean ourselves off of bad habits. There are many methods, but I'd like to just mention two. They call it the physical self-binding and the chronological or time-relating binding. Physical binding means that you create an actual distance between yourself and the addiction. So for instance, if God forbid you're an alcoholic, the first step would probably be that you should rid yourself of all alcohol. Well, if your addiction is that when you're around people, you just share gossip and slander, then we have to take you away from people. We have to isolate you. The second thing is chronological or time-relating binding, where there is a certain amount of days where you no longer are practicing that which you're used to doing. That which maybe brings you pleasure or brings you some type of high, and that would depend. Now today, of course, there are many different opinions, and it's not a rule for everyone, whether it takes 21 days, whether it takes 2 months to wean yourself off of a bad habit. But certainly the Torah is beginning to tell us that if you could chronologically separate yourself from doing something that you're so used to doing, that's also one of the necessary approaches to wean ourselves off of a bad habit. So between Torah and TED Talks, we're certainly in good hands to be able to become better people. So maybe this week, if we want to take our Torah lesson, think about something that you would like to rid yourself of and try the two things. Put yourself in a position where you don't have access to it, and two, do that for a certain amount of time until the attraction has worn off. Have an amazing day.